and for your insight. Pleasure having you on the program. We now move over to North America for our next story, where Mexican President Claudia Sheinbaum has announced that she held talks with Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney to reinforce trade cooperation between their countries. Sheinbaum said both leaders agreed on the need to uphold the US-Mexico-Canada agreement, and they exchanged views on the tariff letters received from Trump. Here's what the Mexican president had to say.
Estamos de acuerdo en que es indispensable que se respete el tratado comercial, el TEMEC, y compartimos pues algunas experiencias sobre la carta que recibimos por parte del presidente Trump. Ellos recibieron una carta con 35% de aranceles, nosotros con 30%. Y pues las estrategias que estamos siguiendo. Ellos tienen también una mesa con las secretarías del gobierno de Estados Unidos, igual que nosotros. Uno de los temas que les planteé es por qué no ponemos en blanco y negro pues las inversiones que tienen ya planeadas en Estados Unidos para que puedan ser parte pues de esta mesa de trabajo que tenemos.
We're now joined by Andrew Latham, who's a professor of international relations. He joins us live from Minnesota. Thank you very much, Andrew, for joining us on the program. Andrew, how significant is this bilateral engagement between two of America's top trading allies who now face these tariff letters from Donald Trump?
Well, it's key. I mean, first of all, in Canada, it's referred to the Canada-US-Mexico Trade Agreement, and in the U.S., it's referred to as the U.S.-Canada-Mexico Trade Agreement. Mexico always comes a distant third, I suppose, even though it's one of America's most important trading partners after Canada. What's going on right now is Trump is profoundly confused about tariffs. Some days he sees them as a source of revenue. Some days he sees them as a means of onshoring or reshoring production from Canada and Mexico to the United States. And some days he sees them as just bargaining leverage. And I think that's the mode he's in at the moment with respect to Canada and Mexico. He's treating this increase in across-the-board tariffs, in Canada's case from 25% to 35%, as a means of getting the best possible deal, bilateral, trilateral deal, possible. Now, the irony there, of course, is that he was the guy on the U.S. side who negotiated what he called the most beautiful trade deal ever, which was the Canada-US-Mexico Trade Agreement. And it needs to be said that under the terms of that agreement, whatever noises President Trump has been making recently about 35%, about aluminium tariffs, about tariffs on automobile parts, the fact of the matter is, as of yesterday, 91% of Canadian exports to the U.S., as long as they're compliant with the Canada-US-Mexico Trade Agreement, are tariff-free. So right now, and I think not a lot of people know that, right now the vast, vast majority of Canadian exports to the United States are tariff-free. That's largely true of Mexican exports to the U.S. as well. But there is a fear that Trump will override that, or when they enter the next round of that's meant to be renegotiated soon, that President Trump will adopt a different perspective. And in that context, it's important that Mexico and Canada are on the same page, that they present a united front. And I think that's the significance of the meeting the other day.
Well, Andrew, this actually leads in very well to my next question. As you said, Trump did negotiate this previous deal, but given the two countries, Canada and Mexico, kind of face an ultimatum in their own right, how might Canada's economic priorities align or clash with Mexico's at this time of global supply chain disruption?
Well, it depends on the sector. On the automobile sector, it's thoroughly integrated across North America, Mexico, the U.S., and Canada, and has been for a long time. Mexico has certain comparative advantages, relatively inexpensive labor, for example, but other advantages as well, and Canada does in the U.S. And this is a century-old arrangement that has been codified, as it were, in the Canada-U.S.-Mexico Trade Agreement and its predecessor, NAFTA. The disruption that would take place would cost American consumers, including Donald Trump's base, an average of something like $6,000 or $7,000 extra on the kind of pickup truck that's very popular in the United States. And that's bound to alienate further his base, which he's already alienated around the Epstein issue and things like that. He's not up for re-election, obviously. He's term limited. But the movement that he has birthed is fragmenting and fracturing around some of these issues. I'm not terribly concerned. I think there's sufficient interests in the United States that are in favor of the current arrangement, perhaps with some tweaks here and there, but it works right now. And the idea that firms located in Mexico and Canada could relocate to the United States in a month is absurd. They would have to build new facilities, which will take years, and as I said, it will increase the costs. So I think there are constituencies in Canada and the US and Mexico that are in favor of a relatively harmless tariff regime. Now, there's domestic politics in all three countries as well. Prime Minister Carney in Canada has made a great deal about being a tough guy and pushing back on Donald Trump, although he seems to be, when push comes to shove, if not wavering, certainly willing to do a deal that is not terribly detrimental to Canada's interests, but is to some extent detrimental to Canada's interests. To a large extent, President Trump, of course, that's the largest economy in the world. He has a great deal of leverage. It remains to be seen how he will use that. My guess is that this is a lot of bluster, a lot of hype, a lot of havering. But at the end of the day, the Canada-US-Mexico trade arrangement will remain fundamentally unchanged.
Andrew, you are staying with us to discuss more US policy. We move on now, where a new US intelligence